San Diego County covers over 4,500 square miles. That's nearly the size of Connecticut. And what looks close on a map can sometimes mean totally different lifestyles. We're talking about commute times, walkability, school quality, and even different property tax rates. So that's why I'm breaking down 5 areas where home buyers from out of town are getting blindsided and what you absolutely need to consider before you move here. All right, let's get into it. Now, the first place where I think most people are getting caught off guard is downtown San Diego. And look, I'm not saying downtown or any of the other places I'm gonna talk about are necessarily bad. All I'm saying is that they might be very different from how you picture living in San Diego. Now, downtown can definitely look like a great place to live. You've got amazing views, rooftop pools, restaurants everywhere, but the reality is that most locals don't live there. And that's really because San Diego is way more of a coastal or even a neighborhood-driven city. And one of the things you might not realize is that downtown has some of the highest HOA fees. They range anywhere from $600 to $700 all the way up to $2,000 a month. So for that $1 million 2-bedroom condo that one of my buyers was considering, their monthly payment came out to about $7,000. Now, one thing you got to consider is the price versus the space you're getting. Most of these places are only 1 or 2 bedrooms, about 1,100 or 1,200 square feet. And for that same $1 million, you can get a house with a yard and 0 HOA fees. And look, I get that you might be looking for that downtown type of lifestyle, but if you're expecting something like Chicago or Miami, then I gotta say you're probably gonna be disappointed. And that's because downtown San Diego isn't the center of people's lives here, and many of our job centers are actually outside of here. A lot of people work in Sorrento Valley, Torrey Pines, Del Mar, or even up in places like Carlsbad, especially if you're in the healthcare industry or maybe if you're in biotech. That's where most of these jobs are gonna be. Also, downtown doesn't have any actual beaches where you can hang out at. So either you have to drive out to Coronado, which is probably 15 minutes, or you can go up to places like La Jolla or Del Mar. Now, again, I don't want you to think downtown's bad. It's a great place to live for certain types of people, and I've helped people move here who absolutely love it. So if you love the condo lifestyle and you want to be around restaurants and nightlife, it can actually make sense. But if you're moving to San Diego for that laid-back beach lifestyle and you want to avoid some really high HOA fees, then you definitely want to reconsider downtown. And of course, I help people move here all the time, and a big part of what I do is I show you all the different places that are going to fit your lifestyle. So if you need any help buying a house or finding the right area in San Diego, you can always call, text, or email me anytime, or just scan the QR code. Now, the next place you should be careful with is Pacific Beach. And look, don't get me wrong, PB absolutely has that San Diego beach lifestyle. You're right on the ocean, there's a long boardwalk, tons of restaurants, and you can basically walk or bike everywhere. And I always tell people when they visit that they're probably gonna love it, but living here full time is just a completely different experience. Now, what surprises people from out of town is the nightlife. Pacific Beach has one of the biggest nightlife scenes in all of San Diego. There's so many different bars and restaurants, and it's mostly a younger crowd that lives here. So on the weekends, it can get very loud and busy, especially during the summer. So if you think you're moving to a quiet beach town, that's actually not going to be the case. It's also one of the biggest tourist destinations, so it gets a bit chaotic and parking is a real issue. Now, East Pacific Beach is going to be way quieter and a few other parts of town, so if you want to kind of be away from it all but still be close by, then this can be a great place to look. But just remember, the closer you get to the water, the busier it's going to be. And look, Pacific Beach is very dense. Most of these houses were built decades ago, so you'll see these smaller beach cottages, duplexes, triplexes, and even condo and apartment buildings all packed into here. So you're not really getting any space or privacy. They also have a decent amount of short-term rentals, and that's something you might not realize until you actually live here. And sometimes that's not a big deal, but it can definitely change the feel of a neighborhood. Now, they did implement some new laws around short-term rentals, and they're trying to limit them the best they can, but since you're living in such a small area, it's going to be a lot more noticeable. Now, if you're in your 20s or 30s, or if you're single, then PB is honestly one of the top places to live in San Diego. There's nightlife, beach volleyball, surfing, and tons of people around, so it's not a bad place if that's what you're looking for. There's always something going on, you're super close to other parts of San Diego, and it's a great place to meet new people. But if you're relocating with a family, or maybe you're picturing a slower coastal lifestyle, then you probably want to look at some of our other coastal cities. Places like La Jolla, Encinitas, Del Mar, or even Carlsbad are going to be a much better fit, especially if you have young kids. Also, the schools are going to be better in some of these other places, so they're just way more family friendly. All right, that brings us to the third area, which is Fallbrook. Days on market is starting to creep over 50 days, and I think there's actually two big reasons for that. So first is the location. You're basically all the way up at the very northeastern part of San Diego, and driving out to our business hubs or even just out to the beach takes at least 30 to 45 minutes, and that's without traffic. Another thing is that a lot of companies expect you to be in the office now, so if you're commuting an hour each way, that's gonna get old really fast. And that's the number one complaint I get about Fallbrook. It's just how far away it is from everything. And I have a friend who lives out there, and he basically has to make a whole day out of doing anything. So they hardly even have time to go to the coast or even down to central San Diego. And if they do, they basically have to plan their entire day around it, because you just don't want to drive an hour each way to only spend 45 minutes somewhere. So that's a big reason why you might want to avoid Fallbrook. But let's say you don't have to be in office, or you just like having a slower lifestyle, then it could actually be a decent place to consider. Now, I think the second reason why days on market is going up is the wildfire risk. And look, a huge portion of San Diego County is in a high fire zone now, but especially Fallbrook has a ton of open space around it. You've got lots of hills and avocado groves, and that's a big part of what makes this place amazing. But on the flip side, you're completely surrounded by brush. And that's a big reason why it's harder to get insurance. Sometimes you can't even get regular coverage, so you'll have to go through the California Fair Plan, which is just basically a second insurance policy just for wildfires. And when you add both of those up, the cost can get pretty high. Now, again, this doesn't mean Fallbrook's a bad place to live, because you might absolutely love everything it offers. You get bigger lots, more privacy, and home prices that are a lot more affordable. Especially if you like more of that small town feel, that's exactly how I describe Fallbrook. So for the right person, it can definitely make sense. And if you want to know more about Fallbrook or anywhere else in San Diego, I know all the different pockets, so it's really easy for me to point you in the right direction. And I just had a family who moved here from San Francisco, and we figured out that San Marcos was the best place for them. So reach out anytime and we can talk more about it. All right, that brings us to the next area, which is Claremont. Now, Claremont's right in the middle of central San Diego, so the location's honestly hard to beat. You're only 10 to 15 minutes from the beach. You're also right by the 5 freeway, and you're pretty close to most of the job centers. So that's why a lot of people ask me about Claremont. Now, if you're moving from somewhere that has all these big new homes or new construction, then Claremont's basically the opposite of that. Most of these houses were built back in the 50s and 60s. They're usually single story, around 1,200 to 1,600 square feet, and many of them still have their original layouts. So if you compare Claremont to some of the newer communities in San Diego, it can definitely feel dated. Most of these have smaller bedrooms, less bathrooms, and some of them only have a 1-car garage, or sometimes they don't even have a garage. That's why if you're moving from, let's say, a 3,000 square foot house with a big open floor plan, then this is gonna feel like a really big change. And since most of these houses are older, you should pay attention to things like the roof or the HVAC, because you'll probably have to upgrade them. Now, if you don't like HOAs or you just want to avoid them, you're not gonna find any in Claremont. There's no community pools or HOA regulations, so this is much more of an old school San Diego neighborhood. And some people love that because it feels very authentic, but if you're used to somewhere that's more polished, then you might not like it here. Now, with that said, Claremont's been going through some big changes lately. You're starting to see more renovations, more flips, and more younger buyers moving in. So in some ways, it's actually becoming a bit more of a trendy area, especially the west side of Claremont in places like Bayho or Bay Park. These are pretty hot markets right now, especially anything that's priced under 1.5 million. Those are still selling within the first couple of weeks. So if you don't mind an older house that maybe needs some updating, then it's a pretty solid option. Now, I will say that the walkability isn't great in Claremont, so it's not like you can just walk outside your house to grab coffee. It's a lot more residential, and most of the businesses are in these shopping plazas, so that's something you should be aware of, and just know that you're going to be driving almost everywhere. All right, that brings us to area number 5, which is Santee. Now, Santee's out in East County, and actually a lot of people moving from out of state look at buying here, and that's usually because of the price point. And look, the prices in Santee are definitely appealing. You get bigger homes with more yard space, and it feels like you're getting way more for your money. You can easily find a 2,000 square foot house for close to $1 million, which is basically impossible by the coast. The median price is about $850,000 for a detached house, and condos and townhomes are sitting around $600,000. So it's definitely much more affordable, but there's also some trade-offs you should think about. Now, the first thing you got to consider is the location, which is a lot further inland than you might think. And it doesn't look like it's that far on a map, but realistically, you're 30 to 40 minutes to the beach, and that's without traffic. So if you're planning on going a few times a week, that drive is going to get old really fast, and you might end up going only a few times a month. Now, depending on where you work, you can easily be commuting an hour each way. Also, the weather is completely different in Santee. Summer gets very hot. We're talking in the 90s and even some days with 100+ degrees. So if that's too hot for you, then you should definitely reconsider. It also gets much colder in the winter, down in the 30s and 40s, and that's something you're going to experience the further inland you live. Now, the lifestyle is also not your typical San Diego life that you're probably imagining. It's much more suburban with these big shopping centers and spread out neighborhoods, and you're not getting great walkability. They also don't have any kind of big downtown area where you can meet up with people and hang out, so it's just a slower pace of life. But I will say that Santee does have some great hiking and biking trails, so there's still some fun things to do. It's just a different type of lifestyle. It's quieter and more residential, and that might actually be what you're looking for. Especially if you have a family and kids and you need more space, then it might actually make sense. But if you're moving to San Diego specifically for that beach lifestyle and coastal weather, then you should try looking at some other places. And look, all 5 of these areas are great in their own way, but depending on your job location and lifestyle, they can actually become very frustrating if you don't know the trade-offs. And whenever we hop on a call, the first thing we're gonna do is walk through your situation, so where you'll be working, your timeline, family needs, and just what you want your life to be like here. That way I can get a really good idea of what you need and point you in the right direction. So if you're thinking about moving to San Diego, then definitely reach out anytime. All my information's on the screen or down in the description. And make sure you check out this video right up here where I rank a bunch of different neighborhoods in San Diego from worst to best, or you can just check out my channel for lots of other videos. All right, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.